Hi, my name is Dr. Frederick Edward Fabella, and I will be discussing the foundations of quantitative research, Part 6, Knowing Your Research Participants. Okay, so if your study involves people, how do you choose your research participants? Okay, so your research participants will depend on your statement of the problem, and your research participants will necessarily come from a particular population. So, what do you mean by population? A population, for purposes of research, is a group of people with a common characteristic. So, what are examples of a common characteristic? It can be, let's say, for example, residents of a subdivision, or let's say grade 11 students of a particular school, or doctors of a certain field, or it can be people with insomnia. So these can be used as your common characteristic in defining your population. But again, your common characteristic has to depend on the statement of the problem. So make sure that the common characteristic you choose is relevant to your research topic. All right. So choosing from the population. So now that you have a population with a common characteristic, you may need a sample. Why a sample? Because you might not be able to accommodate the entire population if they are too numerous. Okay, so all you need is a sample. And to get a sample, you need what is called a sampling technique. Okay, so when you have a population, you can use a sampling technique called probability sampling, and there are different kinds. But what is probability sampling? It is a type of sampling wherein every member of a population has a known and equal chance of being selected. Okay? Or you can choose a sampling technique that is a non-probability sampling. And in non-probability sampling, the odds of any member being selected cannot be calculated. Okay, so how do you select a sampling technique? All right, so there are a number of factors that you need to consider before you choose a sampling technique. The first factor is time. Some techniques are time consuming. Okay, another factor that you might want to consider is your resources. Conducting a study can be costly. Another factor that you might want to consider is purpose. The sample is based on the purpose of the study. And lastly, you might want to consider accessibility. The population is not readily identifiable. Okay, so these are the factors you need to consider before choosing a sampling technique. All right, so let's discuss first probability sampling. So, probability sampling gives you the optimum opportunity to create a sample that is truly representative of the population. Okay, so there are different kinds of probability sampling. Let's look at them one by one. We have simple random sampling, we have systematic sampling, we have stratified random sampling, and we also have cluster random sampling. So, we will discuss these in detail. Okay, let's discuss first simple random sampling. Okay, so an example of simple random sampling is to place the names of members of the population in a raffle and draw the names one by one. Okay, so that's simple random sampling. Okay, let's now proceed to systematic sampling. Okay, in systematic sampling, you can get, for example, a list of your population. Okay, let's say, for example, you have 100 names. And if you only need 20 names, you can get every fifth name on the list, thereby producing a sample of 20. Okay, so that is systematic sampling. Let's now proceed to stratified random sampling. From the word itself, stratified means that you need strata. So if you have a population, for example, the student population of a particular college, you can divide that population into strata. Let's use majors as the strata in your population. Okay, so you can see there in the example given, each major has a population. Okay, so when you need a sample from a college and you group the students according to their major, you can obtain a random sample from each major. Okay, so that is stratified random sampling. And lastly, we have cluster random sampling. Supposing your population are grade 8 students in a particular school. It so happens that the grade 8 students have six sections. Okay, section A, B, C, D, E, and F. And each section has a number of students in them. An example of cluster random sampling is if you need a sample of 60 from a population of 195 grade 8 students, instead of putting all their names in a raffle, simply randomly choose two sections. Okay, so you just place the names of the sections in a raffle and just get two, thereby reaching your sample size of 60. Okay, so there you have it, the different kinds of probability sampling. But we need to also consider the sample size. Okay, what is the correct size of the sample that you will obtain from the population? To obtain the correct size, you need what is called the Slovin formula. And what is the Slovin formula? Let's look at it. Okay, there you have the Slovin formula. To be able to use this formula, we need the variables or the quantities that are in that formula. So you have, for example, a population of 1,000. This becomes your capital N in the formula. And margin of error, or E, is usually zero point zero 0.05. Okay, so now that we have all the quantities needed to calculate the Slovin formula, we can now input these values in the formula. Okay, so let's place 1,000 there, and 1 plus 1,000 times zero point zero 0.05 squared according to the formula. And when you calculate this, you have 286. So that is your correct sample size for a population of 1,000. Okay, let's now proceed to non-probability sampling. Okay, so non-probability sampling is often used because the procedures are much easier, quicker, and cheaper when compared with probability sampling. So if you remember choosing or selecting a sampling technique, you remember that there are different factors involved. All right. Okay, so let's look at the different kinds of non-probability sampling techniques. You have quota sampling, convenience sampling, purposive sampling, self-selection sampling, and snowball sampling. Okay, so we will discuss them one by one. Let's discuss first quota sampling. So we will discuss what is called proportional quota sampling. Let's say you have a population of 10,000 and you only need a sample of 100. Okay, so but you know that your population is composed of 6,000 females and 4,000 males. So 60% are females and 40% are males. So what you do is you create a proportional sample from this. Okay? What you get, what you do is you get 60 females and 40 males, and you arrive at a sample size of 100, which is proportional. All right. So that's proportional quota sampling. Let's now proceed to convenience sampling. Okay. So in convenience sampling, an example is if you merely need 100 respondents from a school, you can simply stand outside a school entrance and ask people to participate until you reach 100. Okay. So that's very convenient. That's why it's called convenience sampling. Okay. Another non-probability sampling is purposive sampling. So when you do purposive sampling, you have to reject members that do not qualify. Because you have a purpose, you have a standard that you need to meet. For example, if you want to study working students, you have to select only working students. So that's purposive sampling. Okay. So purposive sampling is also called subjective sampling. Let's now proceed to self-selection sampling. Okay. Through self-selection sampling, you may publicly announce that you need volunteers for your study. So they select themselves as your participants in the research that you are conducting. All right, so let's now proceed to the last non-probability sampling technique, which is snowball sampling. Let's say, for example, you want to study recovering alcoholics, but you only know two of them. Okay, so if you only know two of them, what you can do is you can ask these two to refer you to people whom they know to be recovering alcoholics as well. Okay, so you do snowball sampling when the individuals or the population members are not readily identifiable. So you may need help from members of that group to refer you to others. Okay, so that's non-probability sampling, and we have discussed probability and non-probability sampling techniques. That ends my discussion. Okay, so if you want to stay updated with my upcoming lectures, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Prof. Eric F. Thank you very much.